my fellows. I've been watching some videos with Star Citizen, people talking about their fleets, and I think some people are absolutely delusional. Granted, a few of the really big streamers are probably going to have fans that are willing to go aboard their ships, but I really don't think there's as many people that want to actually pilot ships for other players than there is players that want to command a fleet of ships. Because every single player I've talked to in Star Citizen, for as long as I can remember, the main thing they talk about is like, oh, I got these massive ships. All I need is some guild leaders or some people to manage them for me. And I just don't think any of this is reasonable at all, you know. And from my perspective, every single kind of survival game that I've ever played, the best options are usually either you go for maximum meta armor, DPS, strength, and you full send it, just destroy everything that you see, or you find the least expensive viable option that's cost effective and able to compete with the other things basically in the universe. And since the majority of things are going to be like NPCs, I don't know. I don't see a lot of people having the ability to actually fuel and arm a fleet that isn't NPC based. Even the guys that I know that are they have like Orions and Reclaimers and all that, and that's what they want to do. It's not that they want to be on that ship 24/7. They want other people to come and they teach them how to do it, and then they want to leave and leave them on the Orion and the other ship. And I just don't think that's going to pan out very well for anybody. And when I watch these streamers uh, do their fleet showcase and like why they have their fleets, none of it makes sense to me at all because they're like, oh, this is a massive ship and it's really awesome and I could use it for all kinds of things. And then they go down to the next one. They're like, well, this is a massive ship and it's really awesome and I could use it for all kinds of things. And then it just keeps going down. Like the last one that I just watched, they have Polarises and Galaxies, and so it just like stacks up and up and up. Like I can understand having like a torpedo ship to destroy capital ship if you're going to be in like PvP stuff. But like they have like four different really expensive exploration type ships, and they're like, oh, this one is the reason it's in my fleet is because if I want to have luxury and fly around the universe because it's luxurious. And this one is because of the convenience. I get to fly around the universe and not have to worry about resupplies and stuff. To me, that doesn't make any sense in a fleet because one, you're only going to be flying one of these things probably at any point. Um, and in the off chance that you find somebody to run the other ships, it's like they have a what do you call like a repair ship or something that God, I don't even remember what it was, but they had some ship that requires like a massive crew size, and they're like, oh, this or yeah, it was the RSI ship that is a miner ship, and they're like, oh, anytime that we need mining materials, we're just gonna take this ship out and go mine, the mining materials, and yeah, maybe you can with that specific ship, bring your other ship all the way back, unload it, and then get into the other ship, go out there into the universe and start mining. I'm sure that's probably going to be a gameplay function, but having an organization where like multiple people can fly your fleet and stuff, I just don't see that happening very easily, But also these people's fleets are like 20 ships large, and the majority of their ships being bigger than like a freelancer and stuff. Like they have like the biggest ships, 20 plus of the biggest ships in the game. Unless you have an obsessive fan base for your stream or whatever, I just don't see anyone arming that with real players very much, because no one's going to want to just take orders every day. What you're going to do. I mean, you could tell them like, hey, you can use this, and if I need you, come help me. But then you can't guarantee that they're going to be online or anything, and then you don't have the potential of pulling out your ship. So I think a much more reasonable function for like if you're going to build a fleet is I think every ship that you pick should be able to work in unison with other ships that you have while you're building up your initial fleet. I don't think it should be, 10, 20 ships large. You're looking at probably, I would say, 1 to 3 ships maybe that you could fuel with a small crew of, say, 20, 30 people maybe. Um, that would probably be the best guess scenario if you're gonna like actually try and build something. Most people that I know, you might be able to fuel 1 or 2 ships. I just don't see it happening. The guys that I know, they're Orion. They have the Orion and the Reclaimer and all that, and they want to use all of that together, and then they want a crew to manage their mining operations for them while they play the other part of the game. And I just don't see that happening because that's going to be an extremely, boring, part of the game for the most part, most likely. You then got to compete with other Orions. They don't have any, ships that can fight to defend the Orions or anything else. Um, so they're just going to be floating through space. They want to offload their people. They're going to need many people to do what they're saying, pretty much in this case. And it's so my suggestion to them was if I combined my stuff with their stuff, I already know with 1 to 2 ships, basically with 1 ship, I could potentially hold and operate everything efficiently with 20 players. And then if I get a secondary ship, I could also run both ships with about 20 players efficiently, most likely. So that's been my game plan for the most part. But if I team up with somebody with that Orion, I can kind of supplement them. Like they want to mine, they want for people to go and mine these big asteroid belts for them. So you go relay, find the stuff for them, offer defense, set up your own mining operations. But unless you want to actually specialize in a specific field in Star Citizen, I think your fleet should be more versatile for the most part. Like if you're gonna do salvage, you can go straight in for the vulture and stuff early. And then from the vulture into like the reclaimer or whatever. But also if you're gonna do salvage, you could potentially go for the SRV, use that to help bring scrap and stuff to a reclaimer, could potentially be viable. I mean there's a lot of options I would say with that. But if unless you want to specialize in something like a whole lot, like the medical ships, like a giant medical ship could potentially be useful to some degree. A giant salvage ship could be useful to some degree. Mining ships are useful to some degree, and you could potentially swap your crew out and get on those and use them. But you're not going to be able to just do whatever you want every day with a specific ship like that. Like if you have a ship that's only medical or only mining or only whatever, um, you're gonna have to come back to some place to find your ship and crew it at some point. And we also don't know if the durability is gonna go down once that ship is in game because unless they make it to where the durability doesn't move when you're not flying it, it could potentially age over a period of time. And then you also got the different types of ships. So, like I would assume in the future, ships that have heavier armor are probably going to be harder to get in and out of atmosphere, a lot more defended, probably have a higher repair cost, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Whereas like these less defended ships, the more civilian ships are probably more fuel efficient, less protected, cheaper to repair and operate though. And then the bigger ships as well, I would expect just like breakdowns and stuff like that would be kind of a pain. And you're going to need to probably know a decent bit about the economy to make a profit to fuel those ships. Otherwise, I'm sure a lot of them are going to break down at some point, and people aren't going to have the funds to keep them running, especially as like a solo crew. But mainly, I just think people's expectations are a bit unrealistic for the most part in the game when it comes to their ships and their fleets. There's way too many people that I know that have like 20 ships or something, like 20 massive ships. And then they think they're just going to be able to find enough real players that want to sit on a ship all day. Like, yeah, there's going to be people that will pilot your ship, maybe, because it's a free ship. But if you're ordering them around and tell them they have to do something, you don't know how well that's going to go. And then finding crew members that just want to sit around on those ships could be difficult. I think the good upgrade for me, it always starts probably the cutter. You start with a cutter. It's very flexible, all around starting ship, looks durable, has the VTOL thrusters, And then for me, probably moving straight up into the Cutlass Black because it has the ability to haul ground mining vehicles, ground vehicles in general, cargo, drop ship. Um, Probably the biggest downside to it is just the durability and also that it has two VTOL thrusters on the back, which could potentially be kind of weird when they doing like new flight models and stuff in the future. But then from like the Cutlass Black, you'd probably, get those ground vehicles. Then you'd work probably towards a Constellation because then you could load the ground vehicles up into the Constellation, have a little bit extra cargo space. You get an additional snub fighter, you get a bunch of missiles, and firepower that's kind of similar to the Cutlass, and also you have more space for more crew members potentially. So that's probably that would be the next step up. And I also think that the constellations have a position in a fleet if you're going to go for a massive scaled fleet in the future because they hold so many missiles that they're just kind of useful in that sense where they can just shoot missiles off like crazy. Um, or they could potentially store the missiles for you because since they hold so many missiles, you could use them to refuel and like store missiles to rearm your other ships potentially, I would assume. But then like from there, probably up to a Carrack because the Carrack is going to be a better version of the Constellation for a bigger group of people. This is where I would say 12 to 20 people could potentially crew and operate that ship. Some people disagree with me and say the life support and stuff wouldn't hold it. But as far as I'm concerned, when there's a crew limit on a ship, I think that's AI crew, and then you could also put your real players with it. So if I have a Carrack, for instance, and I put 6 AI crew on there, and that's enough to operate the ship, then I can have 6 real people on there. That's another um, 6 hands that I could use for ground operations or whatever else that I'm needed for doing. And then you put another 8. You have the ability to do everything on the ship and fully do everything with human players. But the difference between like something like a Carrack and like an Orion or something though is that an Orion is going to have just that one thing that it's doing. You can't really defend with it. You can't really attack with it. As far as I know, there isn't really anywhere to store vehicles or anything like that on it. So if you're on that ship, you're on that ship, and you're going to be on that ship for a while, doing whatever that ship does. Whereas like something like the Carrack, you're on the Carrack, you do what the Carrack does, it's just like searching, finding things, whatever. But you're also going to have the ability to go down to planet surfaces. You're going to be able to offload ground vehicles for ground combat or box missions or bounty hunt missions. You have a medical bay for medical type missions. You have rock DSs or rocks that you can carry on for mining missions. So those kind of ships are multi-role in the fact that they can just hold and do so much in one package. And I think that's a lot better experience for, say, a crew of players that don't want to specialize in one particular environment of the game. Um, so it gives you a lot more flexibility in your daily life without having to go and swap ships. Like if I'm on the crusade on the Carrack, I might have to worry about my gas, maybe my repairs a little bit, but I can still operate the Carrack and do what I need to do on a daily basis without that big of an issue. Um, on top of that, you could go from the cutter to the Vulcan. Cutter, Vulcan, then Cutlass Black if you wanted to. You could go like that. The Vulcan is like a medium refuel ship, rearm, repair ship. So it can supplement things that say the Cutlass might, or yeah, the Cutlass Black might need, but also like the Constellation might need because the Constellation won't have the repair bays and things like the Carrack has. Um, the Vulcan also has a very small crew requirement, has a couple of guns on it. I don't think it has any missiles, but it has a couple of guns for defense, so it could potentially do like low-level bounties and stuff. Has some cargo space to do some box missions. If the cargo space gets any bigger, then potentially it could kind of do something similar to the Cutlass, but it's also heavily armored, so it fits in with the crew. And then even when you get up to the Carrack level, that Vulcan will still have the ability to, bring extra fuel to the Carrack. It'll have the ability to bring extra weapons and stuff to the Carrack. It'll have the ability to repair the Carrack if the Carrack doesn't have all the repair supplies. And the additional benefit of this is that the Carrack has the PCs, which means that you can load up a crew like so basically if you take a PCs, you can put 3 players on it, fly it all the way to a station that you need, get 2 of those crew members or whatever to get into the Vulcan, and then all of y'all can fly back to the Carrack. And that Vulcan can stay around that Carrack if it needs to help support it and repair it and all of that. But the Vulcan also brings guns in to supplement the Carrack guns. It brings in armor to supplement the Carrack's armor. It brings in extra repair functions for the Carrack, or repairing the drones, or could potentially just haul new drones to the Carrack so that you can replace the Carrack's drones that are on board. The extra ammunition that it could potentially bring is also good, and the potential for it or the Carrack to siphon out gas, since they've talked about drones being able to. If you're fighting ships in the verse anyway, and you're disabling them, then the Vulcan might be able to just siphon gas out of their tank and fill up your Carrack's tank and stuff while you're going and stripping components and having people hand salvage ships and things like that. These are things that I don't think people are really thinking about when it comes down to fleet, and this is what I think about when I'm doing fleet control, because if you're taking the Carrack out on an exploration mission, the Vulcan would actually be very, very nice to have with it, because potentially the Carrack could swap out drones, because they said that the drones might be modular in a sense where you could swap them out. So in that sense, you could have salvage drones or repair drones or something on board the Carrack, siphon out the gas yourself, put it into your fuel tank, or take salvaging material and stuff from the crafts that you destroy to keep the Carrack operational. I think these are all viable options that would also make the Carrack rival the Odyssey. And I don't think people are really thinking about that all too much, is that the Carrack, if it is able to get those drones and able to siphon gas out of tanks, it's gonna be on peak or pretty close to what the Odyssey can do. It's just going to be a little bit more taxing for the most part. But if you have a fairly big crew, I mean, you're going to be able to take down ships, Park your Carrack outside, evac some people out with salvaging guns, or put drones out to start salvaging ship parts. Get salvaging material to repair your Carrack. Plus, you're going to be able to. I mean, basically, as long as you don't have anything that destroys a structure off of your Carrack, like a piece of the frame, you should be good. But the Carrack, the way it's built, um, the only thing you could really lose is probably like a landing gear, like one of the sides with the turrets on it. Maybe. I don't see losing giant pieces of the Carrack being that big of a deal compared to like the Cutlass Black. But the real benefit is that you're offering a bunch of different player like experiences and loops in one ship package. So you can have people go out and hand mine. You could have people go out and mine with the Rock DS. You could have people go and salvage a ship with hand tools. You could have them salvage with a drone. Um, you could have waypoints and stuff that you can find with the Carrack with the scanners. You have cargo areas that you could potentially load and offload military equipment for ground operations or anything like that. And this is something that's more akin to, I would say, keeping a larger crew of real people on board one ship is when you can give them all flexibilities and all an important role, where they can fly around. So like medical, just transportation, box missions, all that stuff. And then the Vulcan goes really nice paired with that because it basically has a very similar function of the Carrack, except for in a smaller package of it, like a two-man crew. So you take that 20-person limit or whatever on the Carrack, take a couple of the crew members off, you stick them in the Vulcan, put two or three over there, and you're going to have a couple of ships. The next upgrade would probably be towards the Liberator. That's what I'm looking at right now, because the Liberator also serves those same functions where it is potentially a cargo hauling ship, it is potentially a vehicle transport, so there's a couple of options that you can have there for internal gameplay. It potentially is a repair station for smaller craft, yours or somebody else's. So it can supplement both the Carrack and the Vulcan's repair capabilities, probably a little bit. Has more internal storage capacity, so you're spreading your internal storages over a couple of ships instead of just one ship. So the Carrack already has like 400 or 500 or something, and you put the Liberator there, you're already going to be bumping it up to like 800, 900, um, potentially, but spread out over two things. And then for ships on top of the Liberator, as long as you don't need a dedicated medical craft, which I've already thought of kind of a solution to that at some point. The main thing with the Liberator is that it doesn't have defensive turret options. Like it doesn't have a lot of defensive turret options. But I think the solution to that is really something like the Gladiator in the front. So you could do a Gladiator that has a big man-mounted turret. It only takes one person to arm the turret. And then the Cutlass Black, as far as we can tell, is going to be able to sit on the back. So that would give you a craft to use for transportation, a craft to use for drop ships. Both craft having ample amount of missiles to supplement the Liberator's missiles itself, plus the potential for torpedoes and all of that. And then you would have six or so arrows in the middle landing bay on top. So with a Liberator, you could have basically a small dedicated bomber, um, as well as a small cargo and dropship with the Cutlass, and potentially six of those fighters, which there's also a few different variations you could have because you could swap out like the Gladiator for a Nomad, you could swap out the Cutlass for a Legionnaire. There's a lot of things, variations you could do. You could swap out the Gladiator for a Redeemer and have some massive guns on the front of your ship, put a Legionnaire on the back or the Cutlass on the back. I think there's a lot of versatility with that platform in general. But it also just means that you can have larger ground operations. You could potentially add like a medical ship on board if you need to. Like you could put I don't know, like a rescue PCs or Cutlass Red or something on it if you needed to. Rescue PCs would probably be fine. or a rescue Argo when they come out. You could put an additional one there potentially. But it's giving you all the same flexibility as you did with the Carrack, except for now you have more options for people to say like go on an adventure and then come back to your ship um, as you're just kind of going around the universe, you know. A lot less control. But the thing is like feasibly you can run both of those ships, like all of those ships. Like one ship you could run with 20 people fairly easily, and then all of like two or three of those ships together, you could still run with 20 people. So there's like flexibility there. You're not going to need like 100 people. 20 is a lot more reasonable, I think. Um, and then these ships have a smaller footprint. Probably not going to need as much management and stuff like that. You could potentially run them with NPC crews if NPC crews come in, because you really wouldn't need anything major besides like somebody to drive. Because even if I'm playing by myself and I have both of those ships with NPC crews, I could fly, land the Carrack down on a planet's surface, and then take the PCs up, grab the Liberator, land it on the surface, and you essentially have your living areas. ASOP Vehicle Retrieval System. Two Auroras. I think things like this SRV have flexibility, but I probably won't keep the XRV um, compared to the Liberator because it doesn't have the flexibility of a something like the Cutlass. The SRV, I mean, it's kind of interesting because money making wise, it could potentially supplement a Redeemer. A Redeemer or Crucible or anything along those lines, or big ships getting off of planets, it could be very useful in those situations. And but it also has a small amount of cargo space, so it can do box missions. It also has a very, very big fuel capacity from what we've seen as well. Like it moves fast, good fuel capacity, good handling, secret cargo. The SRV also seems like it could be good for like secret missions because it doesn't have any weapons or anything. So pirates and stuff like that might think that you're a very easy target, and then you could load people in the bottom of the cargo bay for the pirates to come in, and then you just light them up, you know? Or they send people over, and then you send people over to their ship and try to board their ship. I could see like sneaky things that you could do with the SRV, but it's probably a pretty interesting starting ship. Overall, like I just think, especially if we're really taking into consideration how a lot of games end up working out, building a fleet around the most expensive, biggest ships that are specialized in specific roles, I just don't think is viable. Like it's not a good option. If you're gonna build a fleet in the game, I think with a fleet, you really don't want like 20 ships. You want like as a singular player, you're going to want like 2 or 3 ships that work very well together and can be kind of operated at the same time with the same number of people, but also can supplement other forms of gameplay. So, like an SRV can supplement a little bit of people's gameplay at the very early beginning. The Cutlass Black is more of your own gameplay experience that you can have going around and doing your own stuff. You could potentially help people like occasionally, but like the Vulcan should be able to do the box missions, should be able to do some of the bounty hunting stuff, should be able to help people with their ships, their fuel, their armor, their ammo, their repairs. That right there is like pretty flexible. It could also help bigger ships and smaller ships. That's a lot of flexibility in one craft package, maybe even more so than the Cutlass. Cutlass has more of a flexible offensive package, whereas the Vulcan has more of a flexible, like defensive kind of operational support package. So, and if that cargo bay gets any bigger and it can fit a rock or something back there, I mean, you could potentially add mining to that operation. If you're already helping out things with salvage, then you could potentially add salvage to the ship. There's a bunch of things that you could potentially do that'd be a little bit more interesting with the Vulcan than, say, the Cutlass. But these bigger ships that are specialized, I just don't see them being a part of a massive fleet. Like the Orion, I just don't see it as a big massive fleet operation. That's more of just like an organization, like a corporation type thing. So like in my examples, the people that I know that have one of those, they don't necessarily want to operate it. They just want to own it and have somebody run it for them, which is fine. But they haven't put any thought into defense. Just generally like defense or knowing where they're going to go. Because you're not just going to be able to take an Orion, probably fly out there and make money with it that easily. Like you might be able to at the beginning, but if there's a bunch of mining ships or anything, like I mean, you could run people over and get criminal stats. There's a lot of stuff. Well, you take like a Carrack, you fly out there, you do scannings and you find materials, you take samples, whatever. Um, Contact the Orion, get the Orion in position to start going in and taking some material off. Then you could land the Carrack on the planet's surface and do other missions on the planet's surface, potentially swap out people with the Orion crew. Also the potential benefits of, crafting materials and stuff in the future. You could see the Orion and the Reclaimer being useful, but just by themselves, they're probably going to be rather boring to deal with, even if they are more time efficient. Whereas, like, a Carrack could potentially still salvage material. It's just you're going to have a number of players willing to just grab some beams and start salvaging instead of having a Reclaimer do it. And they probably could. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that you could probably have 20 players just strap on a laser beam and just go out there and start salvaging some ships. But you're going to be hard pressed to have like a crew and a reclaimer just be like, okay, we need to go and do some air combat and defend ourselves. So they might be more efficient, make more money doing their thing, but I don't think they're going to be as flexible in general, just gameplay wise. And then the amount of crew that you're going to need, for those ships, like I don't know how many the Orion's going to need. The Reclaimer is probably going to need a couple for sure. The Reclaimer is also a big ship, but yeah, when you're looking at all of that, you're having if you're flying an Orion or a Reclaimer, then you're going to need crew members that you're gonna have to pay people to sit and like watch you, come in and guard you when you need help, which means they're gonna need their own craft, use their own fuel, time, and resources to fly around with you. Whereas like something like the Carrack and the Liberator, they can be a part of your crew doing that mining and stuff with you, and also deploy defensively in the same area. So like if we take this for comparison, let's take the Reclaimer versus the Liberator, and let's just remove the Carrack out of the equation. So you have the Reclaimer versus the Liberator. You could have 6 arrows, I guess, on the center of the ship. Let's say that you don't even have a gladiator yet. You have 6 arrows and you have a cutlass on your Liberator. Some mining and ground vehicles. You're able to haul some cargo for some profits, just selling cargo. Or you can help people move their ships out from one area to another, so you can do ship transports and cargo like transports. You're able to do some ground mining when you want. You're able to do some hand salvaging when you want. Um, Sadly, there's no med bay on the Liberator as far as we know, so that would be the one downside to not having the Carrack. But you can also respond to bounty missions and defense contracts with other people. You'd have a lot more flexibility in that sense. You could potentially do repairs for ships that are around that you have stuff for. A lot more flexibility in fields that you could do, essentially. I think that's a lot more grounded approach. Um,